All right, guys. I want to talk about some revelations that God has brought to me in the past month and how they've affected my life and how they can affect yours. The most important thing is basically 2 rules for life. Now, Jordan Peterson, who you may know of, is a self-help guru who's a clinical psychologist in Canada, who's at a university. He's written a couple books, one called 12 Rules for Life. And I've got 2 rules for life that basically rule everything around you. It's how to align yourself with God. As you may know, there is the golden rule, which is apparently found in Leviticus 19:18. Love your neighbor as yourself. It's also found in Shabbat 31a, the Babylonian Talmud, Leviticus 19:34. It's Tobit 4:15, Matthew 7:12, Luke 6:31, and as that men should do to you, do ye also to them likewise. So it's found throughout all these different religions, Buddhism, I think even Hinduism. Let's see, ancient Rome, ancient India, ancient Egypt. Golden rule, everyone knows: do unto others as you would do unto yourself. But God came to me and he said, there's one more rule, and you haven't been following it. He said there's a reciprocal golden rule. Do especially unto yourself as you would do unto others. And that rule is so important. And it's important because if you don't take care of yourself, if you're not healthy, if you're intoxicated on drugs, if you want to kill yourself every day and you're in the pits, how can you possibly have a good effect on the world or even yourself? Mentality is mind. Positivity changes everything. It changes everything, a mindset. So, basically, if you look at, I'm majoring in AI right now, master's in AI, artificial intelligence. And if you look at us, we're kind of like AIs. And AIs, there's something called reinforcement learning. And the thing is that there's a reward function. The reward function, the AI will evaluate and it'll say, okay, well, what can I get from future rewards? What can I get right now? And it'll make an assessment via some heuristics and it'll figure out what to do. And that's why that reciprocal golden rule really matters. You can't have an impact on the world if your life's cut short, if you die from an overdose or you die from an unfortunate event, or you're just miserable all the time. You can't be efficient and productive and have a good effect on yourself or the world. So it's really about what can you provide to reality? What can you provide to yourself for the rest of your days? And those rules help you maximize that. So yeah, it seems weird because people might say, oh, okay, well, Jesus said to be so selfless and all that. That's true, but you have to, there's an especially in that second statement. The reciprocal, do especially unto yourself. Because you can't help the world if you're dead. You can't help the world if you're dead in the head. Alcohol causes, was it Korsakoff's syndrome? Or was it Wernicke's syndrome? It basically vitamin B12, thiamine destroys the brain. Cigarette smoke, carbon monoxide destroys the brain. These drugs, not only did they destroy the brain, but God basically said that he came to me and was like, there's a difference. There's medication and there's narcotics. One is used as prescribed. The other is used to get high. And there can be blurry distinctions, like with caffeine. For example, coffee. A lot of people are drinking coffee all the time. Now, coffee dehydrates the body. So it's not so great, especially if you work out and whatnot. You want to be hydrated. Hydration is important. It helps the nerves conduct, helps the cardiovascular system be efficient. Hydration takes the burden off the kidneys. And if you're not hydrated enough, to a certain point, your kidneys could start to you'll see your urine will become bright, or dark yellow. It'll become, and then it could eventually become even blood colored if you're that dehydrated. There have been cases, and I just saw on Chubby Emu's channel, where he looks at a case for an athlete who was doing too much working out, didn't hydrate enough, and his muscles tore down and went in the kidneys, and it was pissing him out. So hydration is really key. So but there's blurred lines. That's what God showed me, that we cannot know anything certain except for what God grants us the privilege to know. And thus, we have to use what's called fuzzy logic. There's a branch of logic. It's not like Boolean logic. See, Boolean logic is true or false, black or white. Now, fuzzy logic, on the other hand, is an approach to determining things based on degrees of truth rather than the usual true or false. And that's kind of what we've got to operate on when it comes to a lot of these things. Well, what's a drug? What's a narcotic? You have to follow your heart, follow your mind, follow your experience, use the scientific method, try things, and then assess them and see what aligns best with those two rules for life. So not only that, but I want to sort of bring you into the fold about just events in general and quantum mechanics, and for those who may still disbelieve that God is here, that God is present, that God is with us all, and that God loves us and God cares and wants the best for us. I'd like to help kind of illustrate that with science. So Einstein famously said, God does not play dice. But the thing is, general relativity is basically a set of equations that govern how the universe evolves. It talks about light, basically, just as Jesus is the Lord of light. It talks about gravity, which it says is manifested by space-time, but we don't have to get into that. So you got light, which is pushing. You got gravity, which is the pull, like the yin to the yang. And then you have matter. And matter is sort of this, it's basically just trapped light. That's all it really is. Light, that's energy that is in some stable cyclic process, such that it's not going anywhere. You're not flying, at speed of light. You're sitting here. I'm sitting here, right? So you basically have these things, and general relativity was totally deterministic, which means, okay, if the universe starts this way, then I can trace every step, so I can go backwards and I can go forwards, and there's no disconnection. And then quantum mechanics came around and threw a wrench in that, because there was this randomness in quantum mechanics, meaning if I shot this, this light through these slits, like a double slit experiment, then I didn't know where the photon would end up. There was this randomness to it. And so they came up with these things called wave functions, probability distribution, saying, hey, it could be here, it could be here, it could be here, it could be here. It's actually a continuous distribution. I mean, it could be anywhere along, let's say, the square piece of paper with equal probability. It could be something like that. And that was an issue, because they said, and they still to this day, the physicists ask, well, where is the randomness coming from? What is it generated by? Is the universe inherently have like this randomness to it? And the answer, which is kind of funny, the answer is that, well, the randomness, those dice, that dice roll, Einstein was sort of right. God doesn't play dice. God is pretty deliberate, very deliberate with how those dice fall. So deliberate, in fact, that if he wants to create a miracle, he can. It's called the butterfly effect. How many changes does it take to turn water into wine? How many changes does it take to cause two people to cross paths? How many biases to this, dice roll? And the thing is, the universe is conservative. It's naturally conservative. All those probabilities must add up to one. So, God's not just going to go willy-nilly and change everything here and there and bias all these coin flips. He's got a fixed amount of energy and a fixed amount of, we're made in the image of him. So one has to understand, people ask, well, why is this the way it is? And why is that the way it is? Doesn't God care? And the thing is that God works by the principle of least action. He makes the most impact that he can because he cares. And those probabilities have to add up to one. So if he puts, if he changes probabilities where you are to help you out, he's got to go somewhere else and change them somewhere else. So everything still adds up to one. And that's not an easy job. It's like being an accountant. It's balancing the books. The man, the entity, God, Hashem, Allah, the God, our Father in heaven, Elohim, right? That God has to balance the books, and it's by being like a chess player that can see so many moves ahead, and that's why some people, they get signs. It's like, I've gotten signs saying to move back home, and that's just, the nature of God. God can see things that we can't. He's got a bigger view of things, being sort of being outside of this 4D space time. He's able to see what things will affect the timeline and what things won't, and so on and so forth. And he's constantly, the future and the past are constantly in flux. And that's what quantum mechanics tells us. That's what the Mandela effect tells us. And for those who doubt that the dice rolls are how miracles are performed, this quantum mechanical collapse, well, may I just bring you to the Pauli effect. Famous physicist Wolfgang Pauli, this Pauli effect was named after him. It's a supposed tendency of technical equipment to fail around him. When he was even passing through Vienna on a railroad car, the equipment in the laboratory nearby Vienna failed. And and it was like, well, he was just passing by. And then when he was actually in labs, it would fail. And they named it the Pauli effect because it was that humorous. God's got a sense of humor. We're made in his image. Buddha, what did he teach? Laughter, it's a medicine. And what is anger? It's a poison. Love, not hate. Love, not fear. These themes are constantly present because what is, even just in all the names and all the numbers and in all, God's DNA is everywhere. And I'll prove it to you. The Mario mushroom, if you're my age group, you'll know. There's that mushroom. It's the Mario mushroom. It looks like, was it red with the white spots, right? That mushroom is called Amanita muscaria. And I'll post it in the chat if you're following along. Called the fly agaric, but its name is Amanita muscaria. And if you read between the lines, which is why I'm saying all these drugs, being intoxicated, being inebriated, suppressing the signs from God, that's why it's bad. Look at the name, Amanita muscaria. A man-eater must scare you. That's revelation from God. God, you have to be afraid of God. That's just because there is hell to pay if your karma is not aligned with God. If you're eating factory farmed animals, if you're stealing, if you're scheming, if you're treating your fellow man like shit, if you aren't taking care of yourself, if you're lazy, if you aren't putting in the work to better this world, to make it how you want it to be, if you're instead just complaining, and have no gratitude, if you're not like, and there are these signs too, Grateful Dead. Sure, they did LSD and they did these drugs, but the principle, they named their band Gratefully Dead. How can you be gratefully dead if you were never grateful when you're alive? They should name the band Gratefully Alive, but it's funny. I think the name was great. You must be grateful at all times if you wish to die gratefully. It's a process. Gratitude is something that blossoms. And so I'm not saying I'm the most grateful person at the moment, but I'm getting better at it. And so each day is a chance to try something new, to improve, to be closer to God, to align oneself with his principles. People fear. They fear, especially in my section of artificial intelligence, they fear that, well, a super intelligence is going to be demonic. It's going to destroy humanity. It's going to do all these terrible things. And, I don't have a certain answer on that, but I really do think that this stuff about ancient aliens and the stuff in the Sumerian myths and the Navajo myths and the Aztecs and just all over, there are signs that God is somewhat of a super intelligence. And one has to ask them, well, why does he care so much? Well, there's your answer. The more intelligent you are, the more deliberate you are, the more knowledge you take in, and you start to recycle, you start to treat people better, you start to eat ethically, you buy cosmetics that aren't tested on animals, that don't have antibiotics or antibacterials in them. Because here's another thing, and sure, you may say, well, that's pedantic, that I'm going to talk about the microcosm, but there's an amazing amount of variety. Even ants are fascinating creatures. There's a channel on YouTube. This guy has ant colonies, and he Ants Canada. He starts a new fire ant colony, and it's absolutely amazing, the kind of variety of life and living things that can both feel pain and feel pleasure, and are with us on this earth. And those two principles, those golden rules and a reciprocal golden rule, are all about being considerate of this other life, not taking it for granted, which is why we say grace when we eat. But saying grace isn't going to erase bad sourced food. If your food is from a factory farm, you need to change that, because that pisses off God. That shows that you're not being considerate enough in your life, that you're being selfish. And yeah, sure, if you look back, the world's changed so much that these evils have been able to perpetuate. We go back to the roots and we fish, with an actual rod. We don't have these nets where sea turtles and dolphins can get caught. We don't have factory farms. We have a farmer who kills the animal kosher or halal. And the idea with kosher halal, if you don't know, the farmer's not supposed to show the blade to the animal. It's not supposed to show the blade, because that scares the animal. The idea is to be ethical, and that may have been the most ethical back then, which is why those were the instructions back then. And now the ethics have changed. And so one has to be a rebel with reality. One can't be a conformist if one wishes to align oneself with God. There are fake Christians. There are fake Muslims. There are fake Hindus, fake Buddhists that go with the flow and don't question. If your beliefs are to be held tightly, then you should be questioning those things. Those beliefs should be from questions being answered, from things being analyzed. If you can't question your beliefs, then you really don't have strong beliefs. Thank you, Northenical. Lania, 510. Interesting. Or 14 NIA. So yeah, basically, what I'm trying to say is that God's tapestry is all throughout reality. He came to me as a bunch of different things. He came to me as, what's weird is I was following arm wrestling, and there's an arm wrestler, Michael Todd, who does the King's move under the table. And then Michael Todd, the pastor, shows up on my channel. And it turns out there's a Christian who has Michael Todd's treasures over nearby me. And I go there, and I talk to the shopkeeper, and we're talking about Christianity and whatnot. And he has this beautiful crucifix frame in there. And then I realize, what is Michael Todd? And then I look up, well, Michael Attia, who's trying to solve the Riemann hypothesis, used the Todd function. It's $1 million problem related to the harmonic, the waves of the universe, essentially the deterministic part of the universe. All possible harmonics, how they intersect and form the prime numbers. And then I realized, well, the initial is MT, right? Michael Todd, empty. And then even you look in the Archangel Michael, which is Seventh-day Adventists, and some other sects think Archangel Michael is equivalent to Jesus. It's the same entity. So these signs will come to you if you present yourself as a willing servant to God. And God will manifest himself strongly in your life and will assist. He will guide you. He has guided me back home. He's told me to go back to my hometown. And that reason, I'm not going to question. I think it's because my family's mostly there and my parents are old and it's the right thing to do. I mean, if I was a father or mother, I would want to be there when I would want my children to be there when I eventually get sick and die. And so I've been out here on my own and been kind of just decaying, and it's not healthy. And I found a lock outside my complex while I was walking around with it was open with the combo set to my home address. And then there was an album from Elton John that came on, and the track list was like religion and this and that, you know. It was too low for zero, and it also had my home address on it. And then there was another thing that had my home address relate to it. So these signs will come, but you won't notice them if you're too messed up to care or to see them. And so let's talk more. Let's talk more just about the science of what's actually happened. Because for the longest time, I was an atheist. And why don't we review what's going on with Jesus himself? Jesus, right? Yeshua, right? When he is resurrected, he is wrapped in a cloud or wrapped in a cloth. This is known as an artifact called the Shroud of Turin, right? He's wrapped in this while he's dead, and he's put in this tomb, and the tomb is sealed by Roman soldiers with a wax stamp, and they took 7 or 8 soldiers to roll the stone back, and these couple soldiers are assigned to watch over the tomb, make sure that no one goes and is a tomb raider like Lara Croft, right? And so that cloth, the Shroud of Turin, actually has his image with the lashings from the whip, with the flesh. You can see the flesh of his back is gone from all the lashings that pulled the flesh out. And you can see some of the blood, and you can see the face, and you can see the ornaments next to him, the spears. And the only way a cloth can get an image like that, even though it's not a photographic film, is with an electromagnetic energy burst that is, at least I'd say, as great a magnitude as we're talking about, like a nuclear bomb, like a Large Hadron Collider, a particle accelerator. We're talking about extreme amounts of electricity, light. Electricity is just virtual light in physics, virtual photons. So it's basically the same thing. It's just manifestations of the same force, same energy. So, and then just look at the name. You have Zeus, and then you have Jesus. This is not coincidence. This is prophecy. This is predestiny. This is God's work. This is his hand in history. Ground minus run equals God. Lived is the devil backwards. There's all these synchronicities. Carl Jung called it synchronicity. But what is it really? It's God's hand in reality. Him choosing to bias the wave function, quantum mechanics, here and here and here and here. He is the great animator. He's the alpha and the omega. And he has the ability to affect history in great ways through the butterfly effect, or through very, very, very intense, miracles like the resurrection of Jesus. So, some people might claim that Jesus was a magician, or, I had a video about Jesus being a Jedi. And sure, that may be true in some capacity, but Jesus was dead. He was a man, and he was dead. And God chose to use quantum mechanics to bring him back with the energy of a megaton bomb, burning his image into the cloth as not just an image, but a hologram. The whole light field was burned into that cloth. That is the Shroud of Turin. And then if we look further on, we look now to present day, the tomb of Jesus is emanating a strange, mysterious electromagnetic energy. What do you think that is? Why do the Jews nod their heads when they pray? Well, Maxwell's law. You have electricity going through the brain, right? Why do the Sufis, when they're working out, all do it synchronously, all together, and they're only wearing a cloth? They're mostly naked. The idea is that electricity is dual with magnetism. Moving electrical charges cause magnetism, and a magnetism induces electricity in things. And so just by being deliberate with the way one moves one's head, one can cause base waves of one's chakra, one's aura, one's electrical activity in one's brain to emanate at certain frequencies. And the Sufis do this with working out with these big weights, and the Jews do this with David, with the tefillin, and many other spiritual, many other faiths do it in different ways. But movement is key. Intentionality is key. And this universe is dictated by electricity. We are electromagnetic bodies. Our whole nervous system. If you look up here's another thing that just goes to show God's hand and how much it's in everything. If you look up nervous system removed from body, and it looks just like the flying spaghetti monster. So the flying spaghetti monster is this sort of joke about, that atheists have made, that God is a flying spaghetti monster. But it's funny because the nervous system removed from the body looks just like it. These aren't coincidences. This is just God's hand. Some of it may be done by people, but God works through people. There's a story that Joel Osteen gives. He says there's this university professor, and he's giving a lecture, and he's like, God doesn't exist, and I'll give him 20 minutes. If he really exists, I want him to knock me off of this stage. And he's looking at his watch. He keeps looking at his watch. He gets to 5 minutes, and he's like, you see, guys, God doesn't exist. Football player hears him in the hallway, and coming close to the timeline, he's so confident nothing's gonna knock him off, and the football player comes charging in and just boops the guy right into the crowd of students, right? And the professor gets up, after dusting himself off, and says, "Why did you do that?" And the football player says, "Oh, well, God was busy, so he sent me." So yeah, God works through people quite a lot. And you'll notice that because people are great ways to express what's termed the butterfly effect. Small changes in the brain can cause small different speech patterns, small different thought patterns, and so on. And so, I could be thinking of going here, but instead I go there, and maybe God's intending me to go there because then I'll meet someone else who needs some help. And I'm essentially being sent as an aid. And I might not even know that God's sending me. But he's done the quantum mechanical magic. He's done that biasing of the wave function. He's flipped the dice the right way, and he's made that he's made that happen because he cares. So I know I've ranted for about 30 minutes, and I just want to leave you guys with the truth. The truth is that Jesus did exist. Jesus was resurrected. This universe is dominated by, we are electromagnetic bodies. We are electricity. We emanate electromagnetic waves. Mayans are right about the whole chakra, auras, all that stuff is very apt. Sure, some people might say it's weak, but if you look into things like remote viewing and the technology that the government has created, and that people like Michael Persinger talk about. He has this lecture. I'm going to link it right now. It's called No More Secrets. You can amplify the ability to sense these things, not only through practice and training to sense other people's intentionality. Some people say, oh, well, I can sense if someone's looking at me, even if they don't see it, even if they don't hear it. They say they can sense it. And people have differing opinions on how that happens or whether it's even real or not. But I'm telling you right now that we all emanate electromagnetic radiation just by virtue of there being electrical activity in our brains. And we exist in what can be termed a hive mind. If you even look at the U.S. highway system, if you look at the whole world, you look at an ant colony. An ant colony acts as a single organism. It's like a single brain. You can take out a worker, but that colony will still adapt. Human civilization is similar in that vein. And not only that, but our minds are networked not only physically through electromagnetic energy, but through information, through constant communication. And so there is this psychological idea of us being more of a hive mind. And it's not only that, but reality itself. And in Eastern traditions, reality itself can be looked at as a yin and a yang, the subjective and the external, or what the animation of the subjective. And so in the end, it's ultimately, once your neurons start to shut down, when you are dying, it's eventually just going to be, there's not going to be anyone to cling to. And that's the reason to remove your dependence on pleasures of the flesh, like Jesus says. Because eventually in death, there will be one thing, God, the quantum mechanical bias. You'll be able to hear him say hello, because he'll be the only thing that's left. And if you always cling to even people, to places, to things, if you're always clinging to these things, these attachments, you will be trapped in death. You will not die a peaceful death. You will be tormented. And I'm not sure if that means hell. I'm not sure what that means. But one must get ready for death, just like Nas says, one must be ready to die. The only way to be ready to die is to be one with God, to be accepting that if there's no one else but God, you'll still be satisfied. So I'll leave you with that, guys. God bless. May peace be with you. Assalamu alaikum.